All right, next we have a presentation by the Coalition for Police Oversight. They're going to provide a presentation on basically on what this board is. I believe, Changa, I believe you're going to be driving over here, the podium over there. Yeah, Changa Higgins. And let me get out of the way.
Okay, cool. Okay, this is kind of weird, so I'm going to be looking towards you guys. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, Chairman and the board. So I'll just start off by saying the last meeting was interesting, but we got a presentation that was done by the Dallas Police Department to you guys about your powers and your responsibilities, and which was problematic in a way because it was kind of centered around what you could and couldn't do in relation to the Dallas Police Department. And so I thought it would be a good idea to ask the chair to speak to you and give you a community-centered and board-centered presentation on what your powers are, what your duties are as it relates to the community, and answer any questions by some of the other subject matter experts that are in the room that helped to create this oversight plan. First of all, I'd like to talk about the coalition. So I've heard several different people talk about the activists that were here last meeting as angry activists, people who don't want to listen. But actually, we're a very broad and dynamic coalition of people and it's very diverse from across this city. As you can see here, and these are not all the names in our coalition. These are just what could fit on the page. But we have a very diverse coalition of people who have come together to support, to put their resources behind creating this oversight plan over the last year or two to make it a reality. And so the people that you saw here last week that were standing up to be heard and demanding that public comments be allowed are not crazy. And so I'd just like to acknowledge them, so many of them out here in the audience today, and say thank you for your work on this. So really quickly, how did we get here? So in 1988, as many of you know, there was a community Citizens Police Review Board created, and that came out of a lot of pressure from the community, a lot of work by a lot of elder activists in the community, city council folks like Diane Ragsdale, Al Lipscomb, Roy Williams, Marvin Crenshaw, Fahim Minka, and others came together to push this city to creating a civilian review board. That board was kind of limited almost before it was started because the DPA, the Dallas Police Association, actually lobbied to weaken its power. So we really just had a board for 30 plus years that was kind of inactive and didn't really have any power at all to do anything but review IAD cases. But there's been several things in this fight that has happened since then. There's been complaints filed with the DOJ. There's been several different iterations of different organizations and coalitions over the years who have worked on this issue, and we're here today because those organizations and those activists and those people actually partnered with Chief Hall. She looked over our plan. She agreed with most of it, 80 to 90% of it. What we didn't agree upon, we, over a course of a year, were able to modify in order to get what was actually voted for last April. So, like we're saying, when you see people so passionate about this work, it's because people like myself who spent 10 years on it, and others who have spent over 10 years, decades. We have elders who have been advising us in this process. It is something that is very personal, and it's particularly personal to marginalized communities, black and brown communities that have bore the brunt of bad policing in Dallas. So it's almost offensive to hear people talk about their right to sit on this board and their right for their perspective when this is created for oversight. And it's a restorative board. Like what you're doing is restoring something that had been broken, and that was never right. And so your attitude and your framework on how you look at this, you need a mindset shift if you plan on staying on this board, because it is different. So the Community Police Oversight Board, the mission primarily is to promote respect and public trust between residents and the police department. But it also is a restorative. The mission is also about restorative justice, too. You are here to help fix the years of historical problems that we've had with policing between black and brown communities, other marginalized communities in Dallas. Protecting the civil and legal rights of Dallas residents, and building trust between the police department and improving public safety. So I will just say this, is that public safety, as we've heard throughout this year, reimagining public safety and talking about public safety being something that has to shift from something that is so police-centered and police-focused, that you are a part of public safety, this board. And you are on the front lines of reimagining what public safety is going to mean, instead of it being just something that always is centered around Dallas Police Department. So the Oversight Board focus is really 5 areas. So structural independence, transparency and accountability, procedural fairness, public outreach and engagement, and training and education. And I'll go quickly through all of these because I believe, Chairman, you have some time for some questions and comments from the board. So I'm going to move quickly through these. Structural independence. So this board is an independent oversight agency accountable to the community, the city council, and the mayor. Not the police, not the city manager, or anybody else. It provides a window into IA processes, internal affairs processes for complainants. It accepts complaints instead of the traditional way that complaints were being accepted before, which if you wanted to file a complaint on the police department, you had to go to the police department. And so it gives a new way, and as Bruce Orr talked about, there should be several different ways to file now online and in different city facilities across the city. It makes recommendations about police findings around internal affairs, investigations before the final decision of DPD. It has the ability to launch independent investigations. It can proactively, not reactively, in a review model, but it can proactively make recommendations about policies and practices, from early warning systems to what happened with Diamond Ross to all types of things with policing. So you guys got your hands full just with that alone. Procedural fairness. So a big part of what this board is tasked with doing is to have a civilian-led complaint process, but also to look across the spectrum of what policing is in Dallas and to understand how can you make this more procedurally fair for citizens. We just heard tonight that we got families who had people who died in police custody that couldn't see the video for a whole year, over a year, right? We've heard a man come up and said he filed several complaints who sounds like he could possibly be wrongly convicted, right? So, and we know of people who we worked with over the years who have had complaints going to a black hole, and they never got any correspondent or anything on their complaints. So procedural fairness in all areas of police with citizens. And also mediation if a citizen wants it. If somebody from the community says, I'll file a complaint, but I just really want to talk to this officer, it's your job to facilitate that process. Public outreach and engagement. Ongoing outreach to get community feedback, learn, and have input into the board's decision making. So one of the big tenets of 21st century policing, and I would really recommend that you guys go and look at the President Obama's 21st Century Policing Task Force recommendations, but community-led policing initiatives has to be at the core of what you're thinking about and what you're advocating and what you're recommending to the police department. You're going to be the public face, according to the new way this board functions in times when critical incidents happen, like Diamond Ross or when Botham John happened. So, it may very well be that you could be sitting in a room full of people that are angry like this over an incident. And it's going to be your job to stand up in front of them and tell them what you're going to do and how you're going to represent them. Your job isn't really to sit here and be fair and balanced for the police department. The police department already has the law. They have the union. They have protections behind them. They're well protected. They have federal law behind them. So they don't need any more protections. This is about fairness and protections for citizens. Transparency and accountability. We heard that word a lot tonight, right? So this board is supposed to be a tool to help the community understand police policies and practices, and to help understand police policies and practices, right? What is the practice? What is the practice when someone goes into and when they're arrested and they need medical attention, right? What is the practice when someone goes into their or it gets a warrant and it doesn't have the right information on it, right? It's your job to find that out, and also report that to the community. Reporting on an annual basis to the council, the mayor, and all the recommendations that you make to the chief. This is a transparent process. The community is supposed to know about it. So your job is to make sure we understand. And to also be a window into Dallas Police Department, right? One of the big problems in the community when an incident happens that is so sensitive is we don't know the process. So, all we get is the top cop standing in front of us telling us that the actions of the police officer was justified, right? That doesn't help public trust. That doesn't stop protests. That doesn't stop people from being angry. It just creates more distrust, right? So it's your job to be able to understand those policies, get those policies, make recommendations about those policies, and say, you know what? We're going to come out to the community, and we're going to talk to the community about what the process is and educate them on what the process is to build that trust, because sometimes it's just about us not knowing the process. And also training and education. This is a big one. This has to be more than just DPD training you and going on ride-alongs and taking all the DPD training. That stuff's great. The old review board was great about all of that. This board has to be doing more than that. Some of the comments that some of the board members who are on this board right now have made in the media lets me know that you need some serious bias training, that you need some serious cultural and historical training around black and brown communities and marginalized communities and their perspective on policing, not yours, because you're here to serve them. So that also has to be a part of this, right? So that means you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. You're going to have to be in some uncomfortable settings where you're going to have to learn. And you're going to have to shift your mindset in order to understand what policing is for everyone in this community, not just you. Because quite frankly, for a lot of white folks, policing just ain't a problem. And that's okay, but it is a problem for other people in your city. And you need to understand that. So your duties. This is an advisory board. It's to ensure the board, the Office of Police Oversight staff, and the city leaders remain dedicated to the mission. Planning, development, staff, and basically make sure your staff and you have resources. This board, many of you may not know, but the $400,000 that's been allocated for this board is only about half of what's needed for it to fully function the way it's supposed to function. So when we have appointees here that feel like it's okay now that it's underfunded, it's really a problem, right? You can see just from one meeting, there's enough work for you guys to do for months. So you cannot underfund this board, and you can't be a proponent of underfunding it. So oversight is to provide a fair and thorough complaint process, which I mentioned before, initiate independent investigations when necessary, and that does not have to have a complaint tied to it for the board to initiate an investigation. If this board votes to investigate an incident, it can without a complaint. It's to improve police interactions with residents through policy recommendations. Before this board was created, I've sat through many civilian police review board meetings, and it was just IAD telling the board what happened, and then the board would have to ask IAD, well, is that standard procedure? Is that legal? Is that whatever? It's like, yeah, it's legal. This is what we do, you know, whatever. And it's like, which is crazy, right? You can't ask the people who are investigating the police to actually tell you if the police were doing their job right. So you can't ask police to say police weren't doing their job right. A big part of your job will be to proactively look at these policies and recommend policies. And if you cannot get the chief to agree, and if you feel like it's something that is of big enough importance, you can escalate it to the council. Of course, being fair and being transparent and accountable to city and community stakeholders. Introducing data into this. I don't know if there's a data analyst or someone who knows about research amongst you, but you may want to consider talking to some of the other council members who have not appointed someone yet to get some data researchers, particularly some criminal justice data analysts or researchers, to be a part of this board. Because you'll be issuing annual reports. We have several. I know that Bruce Orr had just compiled several different reports from different cities to give examples to the city manager and to the board at some point on how those reports look. And so data is a big part of that as well. So once again, community engagement. And I will let you guys ask questions. I didn't want to take too long. So, Chair, how you? And if I can.
All right. Thank you, Changa. Are there any questions from the board in regards to this presentation?
Can I start? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Make sure you announce it. Make sure you announce yourself.
Yeah, Juan Olivo. Is it Mr. Changa?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a few questions. I'm going to start off with procedural fairness, the procedure fairness slide. Are the forms in any other language besides English and Spanish, and will we be able to provide them in other languages than that?
That's actually a question for you. Like, I think that's something that, as a board member, you should be recommending.
Okay. As far as once the police reports are filed, it's my understanding that they are logged and centralized in the city manager's office. Is that correct? So whether or not somebody if I file a police complaint with either us or the police department, it goes straight to that office, correct?
It should go to the Office of Police Oversight, yes.
Okay. So if I have filed a police report or a police complaint against with the police department, that person, or I shouldn't have to come to us, right, to file the complaint?
Wait. Let me make sure I understand your question. Are you say you file a complaint with the police department, or you file a complaint with the Office of Police Oversight?
Well, there was a gentleman that spoke earlier. He said that he had filed the complaint with the police department, right? He doesn't have to refile with us, right? It's going through the same process, correct?
Well, we don't really know the facts of his situation, so we really can't speak on it.
Well, let me rephrase. If I file a complaint with the PD,
right now, like if you file a complaint,
right,
that complaint will go over to the Office of Police Oversight.
The same process
they will house all. And this is a new process. Now his process was different. So the new process, if you file a complaint, whether you file it with the police department or you file it with the Office of Police Oversight, The Office of Police Oversight will house all of the complaints.
Right. Now it's a next slide, public and outreach engagement. You mentioned having some sort of speaker on behalf of the board. Are we going to, now at this point, I'm not sure who to ask this question. I'm just going to go ahead and ask.
I can answer that one too.
Okay.
So each board member, one of the things with the community engagement piece, and Changa, I apologize for each board member is responsible for making sure that they go back to their council districts and educate members of their community on the board's responsibilities, and all that good stuff. So say, for instance, your council member has a community meeting. You can just show up at the community meeting. You can talk for 5 or 10 minutes on what the board is, and that serves the community engagement piece.
Okay.
You may be asked to do more, but that's a start right there.
Okay. Next slide, transparency and accountability. Our recommendations of this board, are they done after we have completed our investigation, or during after our annual report, or when does that happen?
So what happens is after the investigation is completed and we make our recommendations, the police chief, if our recommendations differ from the police chief's recommendations, then she has the option to either accept our recommendations, to decline them, or to compromise. Okay. But those recommendations are public record because of the fact that we will be making those recommendations in this public meeting. Everything that happens in this meeting is a public record. Right. So that's how it becomes a public record. Then at the end of the year, we'll provide a report of number of cases we reviewed, what the disposition was of those cases, how many recommendations we made that were accepted, recommendations that were declined, and so forth, so on.
I'm almost done here. I have 2 more questions.
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Changa. I had questions, and I took this. I didn't know we were. Budget. When do we talk about budget? When do we know what the budget allocates for, as far as public outreach, as you were mentioning?
So the board actually, this is an advisory board, not a governing board. Okay. So the board really doesn't have any control over budget. That is solely up to the discretion of the city council. Now, as a citizen, you can recommend that your city council members support, and anyone in the audience that's a citizen can recommend what the city council should support as budget. And I can tell you that this board definitely doesn't need a budget cut. That's right. So, in fact, we probably need more money than the office has right now. But we definitely don't have power over budget.
Okay. Last question, as far as performance reports go, a year is a long time to wait. I think the community and I would agree with me to say we can get some sort of like interim or quarterly reports, if it's possible. No,
the board has the power to do that.
Okay.
We can decide whether we want to do an annual report, if we want to do a quarterly report. That's up to the board. Has the power to make that decision.
Okay. Again, sorry, I didn't know this is. I would just feel like the community, deserve to.
Well, that's why we're doing this, right? Is because we know that a lot of board members are new, and a lot of the board members who are continuing from last year and the former board don't really know what the powers and the duties of the board is. This board is powerful, and I'll say this to the community. You've seen a lot of media stories about this board. This board is powerful. It's for us to hold the city accountable to make sure that they can be as powerful as we set out for them to be, right? So it's going to take a mindset shift on behalf of the city management, the board, DPD, and the community, because it's not the same game that it was last year or for the last 30 years.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay.
In light of the changes to the board, I'd like to make a motion.
Wait. Let's finish with the questions, and then we can. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. Christian Hernandez, District 6. So you mentioned that right now the board is severely underfunded. How much would you say needs to be more allocated for the board to function in a capacity that it needs to?
So once again, we looked at boards in different cities that had the same population and police force demographics as Dallas. And we looked at quite a few, over a dozen. And the number that we came up with through our analysis was around 1.2 to 1.5, on the high side 1.5, but 1.2. Currently, 400K is what's being funded right now. And that's just to get the Office of Police Oversight staff on board. But that's just for staff, right? All the other work that you're going to have to do, that's not funding that work. So,
Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
I mean, from the board. Any questions from the board? Okay, now we can open up the questions from the community. We'll take about 5 questions, and then we have to move on to the next agenda topic. You can step up to the mic.
My name is Susan Fountain. I live in Council District 10 with Adam McGee. Since this is a brand new board, I implore all of you and the members of the community to allow this board to do the job that they were appointed by. And since it is a new board, I would like to know if the allocated expenditures is a starting point. I have yet to see one complaint handled by this board yet due to the nature of the speakers at the last meeting. I was here, and tonight's meeting took a great deal of time. It's important to hear from the community, but y'all are not able to do your job if your time is taken with all the speakers. Can you not take the allocated funds that you've been given and use it as a starting point in order to see if the number of complaints merit the adjustment in the allocated funds to the $1.5 million that you'd originally asked for?
So, Chairman, if I could, I know that Bruce Orr, who is a member of our coalition on the policy team.
Let me take this real quick.
You want to take it?
Yeah,
okay.
let me take this real
Because he
quick.
has some numbers around.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, this is a starting point. Yes, it is a starting point. One of the things is that, and the assistant city manager will give us a briefing on where we are as far as hiring the monitor, the director of Office of Police Oversight, and then getting that office staffed. And some of those monies are going to go towards paying the salaries for those employees, because we're free.com up here.
Have you hired anyone yet?
The assistant city manager will provide a briefing that will give everyone the information on that.
Okay.
He's going to do that this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Pamela Grayson, first of all, let me say that I appreciate you taking our comments, because you are for the community. We thank you for that. We want to be heard. Secondly, we do understand those of us that have taken the time to educate ourselves on the process. It takes time. We understand why you need the additional budgeting, because you have salaries to pay for key jobs that are going to facilitate this board. But I do have one question. One of the key points tonight that Changa made was this board is to serve the community. You are not here to protect the police. And I guess I'm questioning. I want to hear from each member. Do you understand that? Do you understand that that's your purpose?
I hate to interrupt. Do you have a question?
That's my question. Do you
have a question in regards to his?
Oh, I thought you said we could ask the board questions. My bad.
You can ask questions in regards to the presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to know, does the board understand that, though? I really do.
Thank you.
Well, one of my other questions is on top of not just that they're not here to protect the police. I think the real question is what type of time frame you're talking about as far as investigating the complaints, and how long will people have to be waiting until they know for sure that their complaint is being taken seriously and it's not thrown down the road to the next person.
Now, that's the reason why why the Office of Police Oversight is so important, because of the fact that the claim specialists are going to take your claim. They're going to walk you through every step of the process and keep you updated in regards to the status of your complaint. So you won't be Your complaint won't go into some black hole. They will reach out to you periodically to let you know the status of your complaint.
Hello. Once again, my name is Devontae D. Peters. I was just trying to get clarity. I remember Juan had asked about when you file complaints against the department. You know, how he inquired about the process, and I think you had kind of stated that the complaint is supposed to go directly to this board, or could you kind of explain what you explained to him?
So I just want to make it clear: this board, we do not process complaints. We do not accept complaints.
Right.
The complaints are taken by the Office of Police Oversight, or the complaints can be received by the police department. You can either go to the police department, or you can go to the Office of Police Oversight, and you can make a call. Wherever the complaint comes in at, either from the Office of Police Oversight or from a police department, they are housed in the Office of Police Oversight.
Okay. So I guess my question would be basically just to help me understand the process, since my complaint was against the police chief. So she probably wouldn't be investigating herself in this. Why was this not sent to y'all or to the Office of Police Oversight?
No,
it was sent to the Dallas Fire and Rescue.
Well, because of the fact that, one, the Office of Police Oversight hasn't been hired yet.
Okay.
So someone has to investigate it.
Okay, so I guess if somebody else, if he files in a complaint and it's not against the police, it was just a police officer, would it then go to the Office of Police Oversight or the Review Board, or would it then subsequently have to go to the Dallas Fire and Rescue like mine did?
Well, currently the Office of Police Oversight hasn't been filled yet.
Okay, so currently if somebody files a complaint, it's not going to go to the Office of Oversight, Police Oversight, because it's not filled yet. So therefore, could it go to y'all, since y'all here, opposed to Dallas? I'm trying to see why Dallas Fire and Rescue is relevant to this complaint.
So can we talk afterwards? We can talk one-on-one afterwards. I can answer your questions because we have a.
Does anybody else want to know why, or am I the only person? I mean, I could, but you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so let me explain. So let me explain something. The Office of Police Oversight currently has not been filled. There's no staff yet there. So if you want your complaint to go to the Office of Police Oversight, it's going to sit and wait.
All right.
If you want it
to somebody's staff.
Right. So the investigation is being done by Dallas Fire and Rescue. They will not render a decision. The board has to review that complaint before a decision is made. The board is going to review it either with the monitor, which possibly could be hired. If not, then we will work with the city manager to find another way so that we can review the complaint, so we can have someone with the expertise to review the complaints, to independently review it, to make sure that if there's anything that within the investigation that may have been missed,
right.
If there are areas of the investigation that maybe should have been taken that weren't taken, so that we can make a decision in regards to whether we feel that that complaint has been investigated thoroughly or not. Because we may ask for an independent investigation. We do have the power to do that. So if we don't agree with the recommendation or the outcome, we can ask for an independent investigation.
Okay, I guess I would ask y'all, could y'all do that? But before that, it's kind of seeming like, okay, if one of these people who was here last time on the 8th of October, if they decided to file a complaint on one of the officers that pushed them, would that complaint go to Dallas Fire and Rescue like mine, or would it go to you guys, since the Office of Police Oversight is not staffed?
No, we don't investigate complaints.
Okay. It's not gonna go nowhere.
No, it's not.
It would go to the Office of Police Oversight, but it's just gonna be.
It's just gonna sit there.
It's gonna sit there until staff is hired.
Right. So, but what if theirs is not against the police? If it's just a regular police officer, right. Would theirs still sit there, or will it go to Dallas Fire and Rescue?
No, it's gonna go to the Office of Police Oversight.
Excuse me.
It's gonna go to that Office of Police Oversight.
The city manager is assistant city manager is right.
Excuse me, sir. John Fortune, Assistant City Manager. The process works that the complaints, while they're centrally logged, as the chair has indicated, they're still investigated by the Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department. The monitor's role is to provide the oversight and input on that investigation as it occurs. Currently, since we do not have a police monitor in place, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes, the complaints are being handled, as you asked, for a normal complaint that would come in as someone other than the chief, is being conducted by the Internal Affairs Division of the police department. This particular one, because it's related to the chief, and the request is for her to recuse herself, we found another independent body that conducts investigations on their employees as well to start that investigation. It can be held open and kept in progress until we have a monitor in place so we can continue to have a complete review and present it to this board at that time. So that's the process for the community. So when complaints are coming in, as they have since this new board has been in place, they're being recorded and logged, and they are being presented to the Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department to investigate. I just want to assure everybody that those cases are not just sitting there. They are actively being investigated. So just hope that clears that up.
I have a question. Real quickly, he stated that this will go to the office, but I want to, where'd he go? I want to understand. Maybe we should just talk afterwards. All right, we'll just make this conversation public. I want to take up everybody's time.
All right, so we got to be quick because we
That's
have
fine. I got you.
some business to take
I have
care
a question about the community engagement piece you talked about. So anybody who sits that is representing me, I feel like I have the right to speak with if they're going to be representing my interests on this board. I know that you said that community engagement is a tenet of this board. Are there requirements that are set for the board members here to meet with the community, or will there be expectations set going forward?
So that is, the board is going to have to set those requirements.
Okay, so that's a question for y'all to take with y'all and think about. If you're representing the community, consider meeting with the community that you are representing.
And we did create a subcommittee that would be addressing that as well.
I can be pretty quick.
Okay.
Changa, it was an excellent presentation. I appreciate that coming from the community. My question to the board is, do you agree with what Changa said? And if not, what is your perspective on what this board should be, and why is that different than what the community established?
Thank you. Okay, we have another.
Can I actually have a question.
Okay, hey, So this is the thing. The board, those are the board's responsibilities. What he discussed, that wasn't optional that you get to choose to do it. Those are the board's responsibilities. And every member of this board that signed on, that is the expectation that they adhere to everything that he just mentioned. So it's not a if or you want to make a choice. No, if you're sitting at this table, you've already made that choice. Okay. This board is for the community. I'm the chair. I've said this board is for the community. It is for the community.
All right. I have two questions. So what is the role that the community and the board has in the hiring process for the Office of Police Oversight? And second, does the committee who was just, I think, volunteered tonight, do they have the power to decide that in future meetings when there is that community can address questions to the board overall, and that they would be able and indeed required to give us some type of response if we have questions for them directly? Is that within the structure?
So we identified the members that are going to be on the subcommittee to actually discuss and determine how we're going to handle our meetings going in the future, because we have public comment. Unfortunately, public comment is not public conversation, so we need to talk about how do we want the board to operate. So that's what that subcommittee has been identified to talk about the full rules of engagement for the community, how we're going to do our community engagement piece. There's the whole gambit of board responsibilities because we're really starting a board from scratch.
And can the community be involved in helping approve that process to make sure that that process works for us as well?
Yeah, the committee can be a part of the conversations.
Okay. And then the first question was the role of the community and the board in the hiring process, as far as, is there a deadline for that? Like, how are y'all and is the board involved?
So in regards to the hiring of the monitor, that decision is going to be made by the city manager in discussion with the city manager and myself.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to just, Chairman, jump in there and say that I do feel like because of the way this board came about and the Office of Police Oversight, that there should definitely be some community representation and looking at those candidates for the director. And that's kind of the expectation I have, because we are a partner in this process. So we're going to be pushing for that with the board and with the city.
I would expect nothing less than for you to hold us accountable. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So,
real quick.
30
seconds.
Excuse me, sir.
20.
We only have 20 minutes left, and we still have a lot to do.
15 seconds.
Can you wait until we get finished with the rest of the meeting then?
Okay.
All right.
I won't forget.
Okay. I need to ask the board to make a motion for us to investigate the Diamond Ross incident.
Actually, it would be a motion to put it on your agenda for December. So under the Texas Open Meetings Act, you can't take any action if it's not on your agenda, so you can put it on your December
put
agenda.
On the agenda. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So so I'm asking for a motion to put Diamond Ross's incident on the agenda for the next meeting.
Lauren Gilbert Smith, I move that we put Diamond Ross on the investigation on the agenda for next month.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Now we need to have a vote. All in favor, please vote. All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay.